Hey, greetings everyone. Welcome. I'm gonna be going live here with the amazing Wasfia Nazreen in just a few moments. And if you're not familiar with her, well, it will be a pleasure to introduce her to you. So I know many of you have you've listened to the podcast we released a few days ago with Wasfia's life story, and it's incredible. You'll hear, I'm sure, some of it in just a moment. Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome. Hey, greetings, Robin. Lots of love to you. Hey, welcome as you all are logging on. Let us know where you're tuning in from this evening. Let me see. Here's Wasfia. All right.
Hello.
Hey there. It worked.
It worked.
it's always, I think it's gonna work.
Yeah, it's my second only live here.
Well, it's what an honor to have you on.
Thank you for having me. And the last one was in my half dizzy days during COVID. So
Right. I know. A lot of us heard your story. You told that was how the podcast opened up. You shared with us your experience with coronavirus back in March. March, was it?
March infected, but then it went on till April, and then
Wow.
I was tested negative in April towards the end. But then I had pneumonia,
Oh, really?
several other stuff going on in my organs that no one could tell what was going on. So that lingered on throughout summer.
Do you feel like your body still has, there's repercussions of it still, or you feel like your vitality is fully recovered?
Now I think, knock on wood, I'm in a better place. I don't want to say anything for sure, but like we talked about it in the podcast, there was a lot of trauma, childhood trauma that also got ignited through
Right.
that illness. And, so I had to deal with it. So from the physical level, I think I'm healed, but trauma level, we're always maintaining that.
We're
So
all
that
of us
work is
are, yes.
ongoing, yeah.
Yes. You and I were just talking before we got on here
Yeah.
live, and just saying kind of that same thing, how we're all really, none of us are really excluded right now. We're all going through something,
Yeah.
But you being a person who has gone to the top of the world in 7 different contexts, and just so for people know, I know a lot of people are familiar with your story who have joined, and a lot of people I'm sure not. So just a little bit of background. Can you tell everyone what the 7 summits are, in a nutshell, and your history with that?
Sure. So 7 summits are the highest mountains of every single continent. And for a lot of people, it's almost, I mean, it's hard to explain in short, but it's almost like getting the Oscar in acting. It's like a world record, and very few people have done it in the world. But I did it from Bangladesh, and it was to highlight how far women in our country had come when Bangladesh turned 40, and also kind of recognize how far we still have to go. Because I thought this was a good parallel to the struggle that women in general in South Asia go through, and especially in Bangladesh. And I have already had an international career by that time, and I thought that something as our nation to be proud of, and set an example, was the story of our women. So that's how it came about. I mean, I've climbed other high mountains outside the 7 summits, but the 7 summits were done specifically to for this cause. And so that was finished. It was a 4-year long journey, and it finished back in 2015.
Yeah, I was just watching, as I mentioned to you, I just rewatched the short film that Apple created about about you. And for everyone who hasn't seen that, in addition to checking out the podcast Wasfia and I did together, I really do highly recommend. It's really moving. I just watched it again. I had watched it before we did our podcast, and I watched it. I was sitting right here, and like as I was watching it, you know, you texted me. But it's really moving. Like, and really, it's only a 12-minute watch, and like in that 12 minutes, it does a beautiful job telling the story, and yeah, it's emotional.
Oh, thank you. And all credit goes to the director, Sean, because we were actually not going to do what you see. It was, we didn't realize such a short project. Like, we filmed it back in 2016, February, with a very small crew and on an iPhone.
That's what's amazing. Like, the whole thing's, for everyone, the whole thing's shot on an iPhone, but it might as well be like, you know, it's theatrical level editing. It's beautiful.
And so the script was completely different, and all the credit of that camera work goes to, you know, Stash, my friend. You know, our whole team became you know, lifelong friends, and then John and Inshra, like these people, like, so when Sean, the director, went in there, we had a different script. We were supposed to film me climbing a mountain and something else. And then he went there and he was like, hang on, like, these stories in the back are way better than, you know, just following you on your another climb. So it was kind of put at the last minute, and the editing that happened. And then we ended up going to Tribeca and winning all this like international awards. And so,
oh, wow, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
And then it also like got translated to, I believe, I mean, I forgot count, but 12 to 13 languages by now. And then it became part of curriculum and students' books in like Asia, in
really?
South America. So that was really inspiring.
Yeah.
But it's only through 12 to 13 minutes with credits.
I know, 13 minutes with the credits.
Yeah.
A couple of people are asking, what is it called? It's called Wasfia, right?
Yeah, so it's on my website and just on the home screen, wasfianazreen.com. But if you just Google Wasfia doc, it should show up.
It'll come up, yeah. Yeah, cool.
It's funny because yesterday someone from Bangladesh sent me a screenshot, someone who used to work, my friend Corby, from my campaign. He sent me a screenshot of what you get on Google when you search for Wasfia, and the first option is Wasfia husband. Wasfia. So I'm afraid to tell people. That just goes to show that no matter how much you achieve as a South Asian woman, your worth is always either that it's measured to your husband.
Wow.
Or, you know, they're trying to figure out if my husband exists or not. But if that's the top result, then there is no result.
That's funny. Well, you might have to give a little context to that for people, you know, for Westerners who may not quite like fully get like where that's coming from.
Well, just in general in South Asia, everything is marriage oriented, and we talk more in depth about it on the podcast. And like even after I had finished 7 summits, you know, people were like, well, time for your real summit and the 8th summit, and you know, like everything for a girl is marriage oriented, and that's the highest summit for a woman, for majority, not everyone, but yeah, your worth is always defined by who you're married to.
Yeah. Well,
someone wrote in Wasfia Mountain Film. Yeah, it was premiered. Yeah, in Mountain Film Festival. I'm not sure if they still have it up there, but yeah, it should be on several channels. It's also on Nat Geo YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's easy to find. But yeah, wasfianazreen.com, Nazreen, yeah? Yeah.
/movie. I mean, it's on the homepage, so.
Yeah, cool. Well, what could you share? You know, you've like, one thing that really, you know, that I've heard you say a couple of different times, including on the podcast we did, was like when you're climbing these mountains, I think particularly you were referring to Everest, And what is the indigenous name of Everest again?
It's called Chomolungma by Tibetans, and then
Chomolunga.
Chomolungma,
Chomolungma.
and then Sagarmatha by Nepalis. And
Sagarmata.
both are very feminine entity.
Yeah, so
Chomolungma means
Sagarmata, mother of, what
all
is
of
that?
it. Sagar means ocean,
Mm.
and or yeah, Sagarmatha, and then but it's more or less known as Chomolungma, which is a deity in the Tibetan pantheon, as well as it's called the mother goddess of the universe. Um, and Everest is a British dude's name.
Totally.
Last name.
Wow, that really puts it into context. That really says so much right there, you know.
That sums it up.
That sums it up. There's our current situation.
Pretty much. I think Mr. Everest himself, I don't know if he's a sir, but whoever he is, he himself was really embarrassed too most of his life.
Oh, really? That they did that? Yeah.
um, so anyway, so Chomolungma is a goddess entity, and yeah, what were you gonna ask about Chomolungma? About
Well, I was just gonna. I've heard you say a couple of times, like something along the lines, like in every moment, this mountain gives you the
right,
opportunity to quit,
right.
or how do you say it?
Just give up, yeah.
Yeah. So like and I think probably a lot of us can relate to that feeling, in
Right
general
now.
right now. And really, quitting's not really it's not really an option. It's certainly not a good option. So do you have any like in the film you said there was three primary trainings you had. One was altitude training. The first one you said was cardio training. Is that right?
No,
Cardio,
first one would be meditation.
right?
Mind. Oh, so mind training, and then the
Yeah.
second would be so before that, just the context of big mountains, like mountain lifestyle.
Mm.
It's all a weight game, right? Like patience. Just not just when I say meditation, I'm not just talking about like sitting and building
Mm-hmm.
your, inner values, but also know that no matter how much you prep for it, it's not going to go according to plan. And COVID time has been basically that. Even now, even though I've gone through all those journeys in my life, like it's been real maintenance and practice of patience while being out here, because no, and every day it's, and you and I were talking about it before coming on, like just conscious, like not just in America, all across the world, it's been such a practice of patience.
Mm-hmm.
On a daily basis. And yeah,
Well, this is kind of the question I had, and somebody asked it there. What keeps you going when you stumble? What mindset helps you overcome?
what keeps you what?
What mindset,
Oh,
when you're in that moment of adversity?
right.
I remember in the film, I think you're in that on your final summit is what it seemed to be, and you are emotional. And you say because it's really difficult getting up here, but you say it in such a sweet, beautiful way. What is the mindset that helps you when you're in those moments of intense adversity?
Right. I think just, the movie was made in such a short time, and it is a very short film. You saw how I also lost my brother while I was on
Yes.
the, someone I referred to in my life, but I also lost two other best friends while I was on the mountains, like
Mm,
lifelong best friends. And to
mm,
process, and these are where my mountain friends, these are people that I
mm-hmm,
climbed mountains with. So I actually lived with survivor's guilt for 2 years while I was on the campaign. So there was a lot of internal trauma and grief and letting go I was dealing with while also climbing these physical mountains. And then,
mm-hmm,
family issues, and my my father had a heart attack, my brother had a heart attack in two
mm.
different times, taking care of that while I'm on the ground. But also to keep going is, I think, just to really train your mind, like I said before, like we can, the least, I mean, the most we can do is prep for it, but not have that expectation, and really, really contemplate on impermanence, that because the more we get attached to permanence, the harder it becomes to deal with changes. So when the more we, contemplate on impermanence, that everything is gonna basically, and I know it sounds negative, and
Yes.
it's very like boring, but that's the truth. But when you develop that mind stream where you're like, you wake up and you were prepared to go, and but hey, there's a storm that came, and then there was an avalanche, and that took your camp, which happened right before I was supposed to go to the summit. You're just not as disappointed, and you find the strength to go, carry your bag and load more gear and make another push to, keep going, establish that camp, and just know that if you're persistent. And a lot of people also on the mountain, I've also witnessed, not just on Everest, in other mountains, that they're so attached to the goal, and so sticky to that idea that they forget what they're giving in to, and then they die on the way. They lose track of the whole perspective of safety and team safety, and listening to what nature is throwing you. And we have a saying that the mountain's always going to be there, but your life may not. And in my own career, in my own life, I've seen so many people lose themselves, and where even when Sherpa people were telling them to back off and to like take a step back. So just to know that there will be moments in life when we're just supposed to step back. And like right now, I'm in a place in my mind where I'm just like not making, there's no rush, things will happen when they're supposed to happen. And I think sometimes we mess it up by rushing too much or pushing it too much. I've done it in so many times in my life. Whether it's in your work, in your relationships, or just daily, we push ourselves too to make things happen. And I think the pandemic has really, if anything, has said to like really take a step back and work on ourselves. And sorry, I went all over.
No, yeah, you would just in the flow. Yeah, this is like not only take a step back, slow down, but then it's like right now, my experience, and I know many others, is even if you try right now, pushing will do nothing. It just creates like more friction.
Right.
And I think that's how things are all the time but maybe in a more subtle level. And I think one of the blessings of this time, along with all of its pain and suffering and challenges, is that in a certain way, reality is amplified, and impermanence, those lessons are like that's a lesson. One of my favorite or one of the things my favorite quotations I reference all the time from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He says mindfulness of death, but it made same thing, mindfulness of impermanence, mindfulness of death. He called a nectar giving medicine that restores you to your health. Actually, he says a nectar giving medicine that restores you to your health and acts like a lighthouse. He said a sentinel is how it's translated, like a lighthouse that watches over your practice. And I love that flip of context where it's like now it's not just like, oh, it's so like dreary to meditate on impermanence, but in fact quite the opposite. It takes courage to meditate on impermanence, to like really genuinely do it. Like I find it, it's easy to do it in this moment where we can kind of have a feeling of satsang, and then it's like right open. But to do it like on the daily and to like really hold it in your heart, to where it's the presence of that wisdom is there with you, takes real work and consistency. And so you said that like when you were hiking up Chomolungma, that you actually saw the bodies of those you had tea with at base camp.
Yeah.
Is it that volatile, and that, like, is there like a high percentage of people that go up there and don't come down? Like, what is that like?
Yeah, well, my season, the season I climbed, which was 2012 spring, from a lot of people may have known about the book Into Thin Air. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-mm.
So that was the situation that happened way back in the 90s. But 2012 spring season was the deadliest most after that.
Oh.
So, but that was also because
that's when you went?
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
And then, you know, we're on the mountain for a long time, but the summit window opens for a very short time. And in my season, that happened to be only 3 nights. And what that means is the weather only allows 3 windows, 3 nights. So it's getting, because of climate change, the season is getting like very packed. And so in my season, when that was kind of announced, I had a like strong instinct that the first rush to get to, like, the first 2 days are gonna be deadly, and I backed off. You know, I was like, I'm not getting in. When I saw the rush of traffic, because I was acclimatized to go, but I was like, I'm not gonna be in that traffic. You know, because most death happens in the traffic, and there is a lot of, you know, novice climbers who are just out there making it very difficult. So unfortunately, and there's such a long time that you spend before that in base camp, you kind of become friends and family with a lot of people, right? It's
Right.
a small town, and there's a lot of downtime. So you have tea, you talk, you know. And so there were several, like there was a woman from Canada that I knew. I actually, when I was climbing at nighttime, because, you know, for those who don't know, the night before summit, you're basically climbing through the night, so you're not actually focusing on what's behind you, you're just focusing on the route, and it's like literally just going up, up, up. And I go kick in this like huge thing, and I look, and, you know, about underneath our shoe is the crampons, those sharp things, and it got stuck in the fabric. And I look and I see it's a dead body. And as soon as I saw the body, first of all, it was a human body, but I could also tell it's fresh, because there was, you know, just, it wasn't that frozen. And then I saw the Canadian flag on the body, and I immediately knew who she was, because it was my Canadian friend I had tea with, that I had heard while coming up that she passed 2 nights before.
Oh my goodness.
Coming down. So, you know,
coming down.
Yeah, so most of the deaths happen coming down. Like I was saying earlier, it's like
Right.
people lose their energy and focus. And
Right.
I'm very grateful, because of the teachers and mentors I've had, is to remind that myself all the time, the summit is only half the way, you know, and you've got to conserve all your energy for the way down, because coming down is way more difficult. Anyway, so when I actually saw her body, it's so emotionally, mind you, this is like literally at 28,000 feet, and you're drained, you're done, you're at your own last push, and just feeling guilty that, you know, spiritually kicking into a dead body. So Nima, my brother, who you see in the film, he was like, you gotta come, like, don't, like, because he was always there to, whenever emotionally I would be going on the other side in higher altitude, it's very easy to flip, you know, like, it takes seconds, because in lower oxygen. And I just did a very short prayer, and you can't really stand there, because you're gonna freeze yourself. So and I had to keep pushing. But when we were coming down during the daytime, I sat by her body for a second, did my prayer, and then came back. And also another thing is, like, it haunts you for days, you know, like months, like maybe I could have helped, or, you know, like, but everyone's on their own journey. So above dead zone, there's over, dead zone is 26,000 feet up, for those who don't know. There's over 250 plus bodies frozen in time.
How many?
250 plus bodies.
Wow.
And a lot of them are kind of like landmarks, but it gives you.
And they leave them. They stay there. The
bodies, like, they're famous, like, you know, the Green Boot, or Scott Fisher's body, who was a very famous climber, or, you know, there's so many of them.
That's amazing.
So like when you're on the summit push, most of us have to keep track with our base camp manager and also from the Nepal side, just so that you're eligible for the certificate and everything. You have to kind of call in and say, hey, I reached here, this is where I'm at, this is who I'm with. You need alibis because in recent time there's been a lot of controversy. So when I remember making a call saying, hey, I'm by Scott Fisher's body because that everyone knows that's near the balcony, you know, like, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, so and so is behind this place and this rock. So and then so they become like landmarks, and also it's a constant reminder of, like we said, impermanence, because you
Yes.
could be that Scott Fisher, you know.
Yes. And one day we all will be that.
Yeah, and also before you even go there, you make a, like I made a will because I didn't want people to go up there searching for my body if something happened, because that's sorry about the car. That puts a lot of other Sherpa people at risk,
Mm.
because your body's so frozen. It's very difficult to bring your frozen bodies down, and Sherpa people are paid a whole bunch of money to go up there and make that risky move, and I didn't want
Yeah.
that to happen. I mean,
Right.
if you've died over there, you're already in heaven, you know.
Yes. Right. Yeah. The Sherpa people you talk about in our podcast, you know, and your love kind of for again going back to like Everest, and you have, you know, some of these Western explorers coming, but these people have, tell us about the Sherpa people just a little bit.
Well, Mike, I Sherpa means coming from the east, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're originally so Sherpa and Tibetan culture is very similar. The language is just a little, like if you understand Tibetan, you would understand Sherpa language. Their majority are Buddhist, and but currently in Nepal, so there's the Sherpa, the original Sherpa people, but there are many other ethnicities who are actually working in high altitude. So that could be from a different ethnicity, and Western media kind of packs it as all Sherpa people. So, but there are like Rais, Gurums, there are other ethnicities who are working in high altitude. So way back, I started working for high altitude workers' rights, which is one of the most, you know, it's changing a little bit in recent time, but like we say about, I think we talk about it in the podcast, right? About how you never get credited for the work that you've done,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through payment, whether it's through visibility. Like many people out here, even the first Sherpa person, Tenzing Norgay, who guided, you know, Sir Edmund Hillary to the summit of Everest. Till today, majority people knows it's Sir Edmund Hillary, who was a genuinely very kind and, you know, very balanced human being and has done so much for the Sherpa people and Nepal in general. But till today, Tenzing Norgay never got the credit that he should have gotten, and or the honor. He, you know, died. Um, like most people credit Edmund Hillary, not Tenzing Norgay, but Tenzing Norgay already was part of 4 different expeditions before that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So his son, his you know, his family are still talking about it, and so there's a long way to go. But just in terms of payment wise, Sherpa people are not given the same mass, the oxygen mass. They're just, you know, most expeditions don't treat him, the companies don't treat them equally. But in the news you'll see mostly 50 Sherpas go up, or so and so, you know, these number of, like almost like a cattle, like 500 cows have made it, you know, not like, oh, Nima Gurman Sherpa, like name them, you know, like they actually, this guy has freaking 18 summits under his belt. Like that is real credit, not the one person that he guided up there, you know. So there's a lot of so amazing things in the community. Yeah, like there's a lot of discrimination, and you know, just in the last few years this has been changing, but there's still a long way to go in terms of giving them the honor and the credit and the true recognition. You know, if, to be very direct, if any of the Sherpa people were one of these white adventurers, they would be freaking millionaires and world, you know, like celebrated by the world, because there are people, the Sherpa people who has like 21 summits under their belt, like, and they
Right.
go like first. They're basically the ones who are setting the route up. They're carrying
Right.
all the load, so why not give them the credit? You know?
Right. Where and everyone else becomes the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's kind of the tragedy of the colonial mindset. That colonial superiority complex is not only for the people who end up becoming oppressed by it, but also for colonizers in really missing out on like the richness, you know, that is there by not amplifying it and by not learning from it. And you know, I was watching a program on PBS just today about the Native American First Peoples of this country,
Yeah.
and their history in the U.S. military. And it was really fascinating because, you know, so many of them, they just have warrior hearts.
Mm.
And even with just the really, you know, horrible things they've had to endure since colonization here, still, you know, they show up, you know, with their warrior hearts, and they even, you know, share their wisdom and and teach wisdom ways. But because we've suffered from, and it is a disease, because it's a society and all over the world,
Yeah.
but you know, in this case specifically here, because we suffer from that disease, we miss out on so much wisdom that would help us all be happier people and help us all take care of, you know, where we live,
Mm.
so that like when we arrive in a situation like we're in now in a global pandemic, and just, you know, however people think about that, whatever, we have, you know, Saturn kind of bearing its energy on us, just saying, you know,
Mm.
stop, look at this, look at what's important in your life, you know, um, lift up, be smart. uh, you know, these are, you know, anywhere from like California wildfires to just simple ways of how do you honor veterans, you know, those who've like in their societies, if you went to battle,
Yeah.
then you're treated entirely differently than in the way that, you know, we treat the people. I mean, it's a tragedy after tragedy when wisdom ways aren't intact, to really, because life is tragic. So then how do we live in such a way
Mm.
that allows us to, you know, honor the energy within that? And, you know, whether it's the indigenous peoples here, or any part of the world, the Sherpa people, um, they're carriers of that wisdom. And uh, you know, we would all, it's all such that it holds so much actual innate value that you can't get from being the richest country on the planet or whatever.
Yeah, and it's also comes to the point, how do you define richness, right?
Yes. Yes. Right.
I've witnessed this in pretty much every other part of the world, and you know, in West Papua, which was the finale, that's they're going through their own struggle.
Hmm.
The world's largest gold mine is there on the mountain.
Where is that? That was the finale of,
The Seven Summits.
and so where's West Papua?
So it's on the west of PNG, Papua New Guinea.
Uh-huh.
Many people confuse it as PNG, but PNG is actually an independent country. West Papua is an occupied territory under Indonesia. So you have to actually go through Indonesia. But so most of West Papua, in where the mountain is, in the heart of a rainforest. Anyone who's watched the movie Avatar, one of the inspiration of Avatar was actually taken from that location.
Mm.
So it's a
Wow.
rainforest and it's a totally different kind of terrain. But the other side of the story is there's the, you know, Indonesian army, but also the world's largest gold mine is there, and
Mm.
that's been under control of an American company based in, I believe, Texas.
Oh yeah, you told me that. Yeah,
So yeah, so it's like I've never witnessed Americans with like goat tooths and guns and thugs and wearing 5 watches, and that's uh, oppression level that's going on. West Papuans the ones who are in the forest, they don't even understand what gold is. A lot of them, they just think of it as a barter thing. I've seen West Papuans in chains, and you can't even enter that territory. But being on the mountaintop, I used to just like look through my binoculars, and I've never seen, first of all, a gold mine like that. And there's like tunnels going on, and there's Americans in guns, like military level, like if you're not supposed to trespass. And Papuans on their own land, working on their own mine with chains, like digging gold and basically giving it to foreigners. And it was such a sad thing to witness. And just the big hole in mama, in the mother, like when you see the gold mine, everyone told me there's a gold mine, but I've never seen a gold mine like that. So when I was on the summit coming down of 7 summits, finale of my 4-year-long journey, my friend Joshua, he's like, look down. The sun was, up at this moment. So I just looked down while being like hanging from the ridge line, and I see the sun reflecting off like this big hole of like, that's when the gold started glittering, like it's just, I'll send you a picture later, but it's like that, and then just knowing how many hundreds of Papuans are in there, just trauma. Even like Indonesians know what it's doing to the glaciers, like environmentally, it's a crazy scene out there. All the glaciers they have shrunk, we're killing basically Mama Earth by not taking this indigenous wisdom. That's everywhere. Same thing in the Everest region.
Yeah, how do you metabolize all that, having traveled around as much as you have and worked in the line of work that you're in, where you're really working for, so many oppressed people, those who, the Tibetan diaspora and the horrors that they've had to suffer over the last several generations. How do you personally metabolize it, so how do you stay kind of, with your confidence and your happiness?
Well, in my earlier days, when activism, I've hit my rock bottom many times, and I just had to learn that if you don't take care of yourself, you don't get to help and be in the movements. And then my teachers also, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama once told me that this is not your fight. Like we gotta pick and choose. Like he was the one who directly told me to get off from the freedom movement. In a very sweet way. And in that time, my mind was so young, I was fighting it. I was resisting. I was like, no, I know I'm supposed to be, the rebel Wasfia and not even listening. But, then I had more obstacles come my way to move me away. But so we all learn on our own way. But, now I just know that I have limited energy in this earth and limited prana, like breath. And I need to take care of myself. And this is what I can commit to. So I've stepped away from a lot of causes that I was actually working on, and just, really focusing and balancing in maintaining myself. And then, knowing that there are people who, there's only so much we can do. And a lot of the greatest healing on the planet will really come at healing ourselves, as vast as that sounds.
Yes. Yeah, I always feel there's definitely, with Dharma practice, is definitely a type of activism,
Oh, yeah.
And in a certain kind of fundamental way, it's the most important type of activism, because, how do we have the emotional intelligence and equanimity to actually, stand up in a way that will be more effective? And I think, I'd like to hear what you think, but I think when we're able to have that more relative emotional equanimity and then do what we're called to do, is definitely more effective.
True. And I've also had, Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche, who's like one of my main teachers, and he calls us out directly. And one time he had told me that you got to be careful with this mindset of helping people, and really ask your motivation on why you're doing it.
Yes.
because, you know, ego, you're literally I mean, he said it in some, I'm not going to do justice to the way he said it, but it's literally like, he's like, you got to work on yourself first before going out and like, because I was all over the place, and that could very well be a mask of, and in my personal life too, I overcompensate because from childhood trauma, my inner child has been saying, and we talk about it in the podcast, it's like I'm overcompensating for mistakes that my parents made, you know, because I programmed myself at a very young age that I can do it better than my parents. And so really looking at those and really knowing, having your intention and motivation set right, with as with anything else in life, like, why am I doing it, why am I invested in, yes, I see suffering, but you know, knowing that everywhere there's suffering in America, there's suffering in all parts of the world.
Yes.
But why am I invested in it? And is there other agenda? Is there, on a subconscious level, am I trying to feel good about myself? And a lot of philanthropists actually do it because of that, you know.
Yes.
Because ultimately it's about them. So
Sure.
so I'm grateful that I have teachers who
Yeah, that's beautiful wisdom he
who
shared,
just
you know.
calls me, you know, like he always, you know, those who are familiar with Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche or Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche, who's the current incarnation, he will tell you that you're getting too ahead of yourself. Like he just directly in front of everyone tells you that. So I'm lucky.
That's great.
Yeah, that's hurtful in the beginning when it happens, but it keeps you on the course.
Yeah, chiseling of the ego never feels good initially, but it does feel good eventually.
Yeah, I'm grateful that I've had that kind of. Also, his Holiness Karmapa, you know, like he would always be like, nah. He has a different way of saying it, but like, nah, that's not the reason.
Yeah, that's an interesting, you know, thing to really work with, is that idea of helping people.
Yeah.
And I really like how a lot of those great teachers, and in those types of Dharma teachings where they say, yes, you know, we're, you know, orienting our mind towards altruism, but also recognizing that currently we're not that good at it, you know, and that to really be great at it at a more ultimate level, it's a very, you know, something that's even beyond our current comprehension in a normal, ordinary kind of state of mind. And so this, you know, practicing helping others or altruism within the relative context, and finding great meaning in that, you know, and in the work that we do, and just whether it's formalized through an organization or activism, or just, you know, as you flow through your daily life, you know, a warm heart, a smile, hey, can I get this door for you? And like Guru Rinpoche says, even if my view is as big as the sky, my attention to activity is as fine as flower. And so like even finding, like, you know, even though it's a mirage, you know, this idea of like helping people, but it's a beautiful mirage, like a rainbow, you know, it fades away. It's not going to give me lasting happiness within that relative context, but it does help me cultivate love, I think, and my disposition. And I love how Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche said that, because that's really true. All along the while doing that, like checking my motivation is like reflecting on impermanence. You know, it's not like something like, okay, I've checked my motivation, on with that. Like checking my motivations, like right now in this moment, you know, still always like, what is it? And the more refined and subtle we become in our awareness, you know, then that process starts all over again at every single level. It's always checking my motivation. Now I can see things a little bit better, hopefully, than in the past. But you know, I know like down the road, I'll look back at now and be like, oh, I was not seeing anything, you know? And
yeah,
so
and
anyhow.
I think because Khyentse Yangtze Rinpoche actually told of, because I think it was Dalai Lama who always says to check your motivation, why you're doing it, and whatever it is in life. And I think on the mountain too, like I see people like for example, it's fine if you want to climb Everest to be famous, right?
Sure.
But you got to know that that's your motivation and be in
Yes.
terms with it, because in the long run, otherwise you're not going to be in peace with yourself if you're.
Yes.
And so I think on a daily practice, when every morning, like we have to, like that's one practice I do. I have to keep my motivation in life clear with my conscience, because that's ultimately giving me my peace with whatever it is. And otherwise, I think it's also very easy to get distracted if you don't have your motivation um, clear to why you're
Yes.
doing something,
Right.
whether that's making a short film or you know.
Your sense of purpose.
Yeah,
That's so powerful and important. Yeah, because if I'm climbing, if I'm doing the summits for fame, it's better to like know that and admit that to
exactly.
myself than to create this facade that I'm doing it for one thing, but
Right,
but actually at a deeper subconscious level, I'm doing it for something else. That will
right.
cause me to be miserable
Yeah,
eventually. After that hit, after all the initial endorphins wear off.
pretty much.
Yeah. What so like by the way, I didn't realize that just like 3 days ago was the 5-year anniversary of you completing the 7 summits. Is
Yeah,
that right?
November 18th. I didn't realize till my office from Bangladesh was like, "Are we doing something?" Like,
Well,
no.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
a really
forget the
big deal.
dates of even summits, but I guess yeah. I am still you know, we talk about it in the podcast too. For those don't know, I'm coming out of a lot of life's trauma now that I'm in LA and I've been doing the work for the, like very deep work on myself. And I realized that those 4 years of 7 summits there and the years that followed, um, there's a lot of trauma that I carried during that time that I didn't even process. And I'm also writing my memoir. So that's bringing
Hmm.
up a lot of things that, um, that I didn't even reflect on before. And so this, like for example, how people even like someone recently told me that she thought I was being very rude to her at a time when I was actually processing the death of my brother, who I lost in the earthquake, and I was in a room. But like it's easy to, again, what Kian Rinpoche always says, don't judge a book by the cover. It's like it's easy to very, know, like people in Bangladesh mostly think of me as this like person who's on the summit, with no battles. But I have been going through a lot of really hard realities in my life, and I have come across as very intimidating and rude to certain people when it wasn't what I was dealing. It wasn't intention, no, like
You
that.
were
So,
you were taking care of yourself.
or I was just covered in grief,
Mm.
because there were so many back-to-back things happen
Mm.
for the last while, and it's only now I'm like coming back from it and like trying to mend those things that are coming up, and
Hmm.
as I'm writing the book, and it's a very high level of, like, unless you've gone through like things like survivor's guilt, or um, it's very hard to understand from the other side. Even when I was in my COVID, I was literally like dying. People's like, "Oh, you're Wasfia. You're not gonna." I'm like,
Right.
"Wait, what?" Like, I'm
Right.
just a human.
People have turned in their minds. They've turned you into like a superhero and invincible superhero.
Yeah, but I'm a human being going through my own share of,
Yeah.
trauma and grief and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, it's
Mm.
it's funny in a way.
Yeah.
Someday I'll make a whole comedy about it.
Well, if you can get to that place where it's funny, that's a good thing, you know. That's
Yeah.
a healthy sign. Wow. Well,
I know there have been some comment. This is
yeah,
new
I
to
know.
me. I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
some. someone had said, I don't know if I can still find it. Someone said, I read Touching My Father's Soul by Jum Ling and
Oh
learned
yeah,
a lot about the contribution of Sherpas up there on Everest.
I'm sure it's an Asian person who said it.
Yeah, really?
Sorry. Just teasing, but yeah, like I grew up with Tenzing Norgay, you know. I didn't even know who Edmund Hillary was, for example.
Uh-huh.
It's a very, because Sherpa people have been, I mean, Bangladesh and Nepal are neighbors also, but you know, that's who they have been our heroes forever. But only when I came to America and then got, you know, in the climbing scene, it was a very weird perspective that Dick Boss or like Robert Hall, you know, like all these like other guys were getting credited and no one knew who Tenzing Norgay was.
Someone said, I love how candid you are. So much of what you're saying resonates. I'm writing a memoir and have to revisit trauma too. Your strength is inspiring. Being so raw and real is rare. I appreciate you. That's
Aw,
Stacy Dixon. Yeah.
thank you.
How is that when writing a memoir? And we'll have it, and we got about like 9 minutes before this thing will cut off. But how is it writing a memoir? Are you remembering? I've always wondered, do you remember things in more detail as you're writing that you might not otherwise remember? Because when I'm reading a good memoir, I'm sometimes like, how do they remember all of this?
Yeah, well, one thing is like I remember, but I also have been going through this year a lot of work that reignited a lot of memories. So it was important for me to journal that anyway. And one of the process that's been helping me is I've been reconnecting with a lot of my, because I don't want it to be just my perspective. Like I would call up a childhood friend that I haven't spoken to and how they perceived me during that time.
Oh, that must be interesting.
Because there are memories that and then she would say something like, I was just speaking to my childhood best friend Raya earlier today, and she was like, no babe, you were doing this because this remember that thing happened. My brother reminded me something, and I was like, also climbers lose a lot of brain cells, so things that are not important to me in my database, like I just delete them, you know. So there are very interesting things that has come up over these conversations, and there's so much more. So, you know, just also being open to learning from how people perceived me, because I think those are also uh, important, and it's giving me newfound strength in a way, because it's, you know, those who listen to the podcast will know there was a lot of rejection in my life from early on. Like I was abandoned by my parents, and you know, one thing I've learned is rejection is protection and rejection is redirection. And I've been focusing on things like, what if my mom never left, you know? Like I wouldn't want to be that girl stuck in, you know, I was very like a timid Bangla girl speaking no English. Like I wouldn't have this life that I live now. I wouldn't have the freaking rad adventures that I've had. So in a way, it's kind of giving me healing, writing the memoir, and just valuing all the rejections and the lessons I've learned from all the rejections with everything in you know. And I think that's just very important to remember, especially during that time, this time. And when I say rejection, I don't mean like from a person for sure, like necessarily, but like right now it's the biggest rejection from everything, right?
Yeah, totally. And then, right, and even if you get to it, it's going to take longer than you wanted.
Yeah. So, but it's actually protection in the longer sense scheme of things. It's allowing us a chance to, you know, really do the inner work that we won't probably at a later time have the chance to. And like Mingyur Rinpoche says, if there's one negative thing and 9 positive things, it's very easy for the mind to focus on the one negative and forget about the 9. And that's just how our mind is.
Yeah.
But instead, like, go back and focus on the 9 and really appreciate from that perspective that, oh, it could have been worse, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Even if it's like in sports, I play a lot of basketball. You can have a great game, but you'll only remember the one shot, you know, that you were off on. you know, or teaching, you know, it'll be
Yeah.
great, but there'll be like that one thing or anything we do with our creativity. Somebody asked, what's the next adventure?
Well, I was.
And hold on before, because if we will have to get cut off at some point, 5 minutes or so. I just want to just remind people, you can listen to the podcast that we did, Wasfia and I, and it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, links in my bio. If you also directly to listen to that podcast on just on the website, the links in my bio for that or for Apple, Spotify, and definitely go to her website. And if nothing else, I recommend this top is watch the 12-minute film on wasfianazreen.com. And it's beautiful. But yeah, so what's the next adventure?
So from summer to now, I've been planning so many things, and every time I've planned something,
Mm-hmm.
like California just asked for a curfew now, and today I was told that we're gonna go for a lockdown, and I'm just like, okay, I'm not gonna even plan something. So after the 7 summits, I was doing the highest volcanoes of every continent, and I had 4 done,
Oh,
finished.
really? I didn't know
But
that.
mind you, this is also a very expensive passion.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I'm not sponsored or anything. I'm not going on someone else's money. I earn my money and then I sponsor it that way. You're free on the mountain. So, I would love to finish those 7. I mean, there are only 3 left. It's the highest volcanoes on planet, but just right now it's mostly like inner terrains. Inner mountains that I'm climbing and not planning anything anymore. And just know that, when things open up, I'm also working on a TV show that would lead, like when things flow, I'm going to have to travel and go on many expeditions for that one. Um, like real expeditions. So that will
Wow.
flow. But yeah, till the world reopens, it's hard to tell.
Yeah. One day, who knows? One day at a time. For now, that's the path. It'll reopen. We'll all get through this. We may have to dig deep for our strength at times. That's good, but we'll get through this, and it's going to feel really great when we do.
Yeah, someone just said, she says it so casually, like it's nothing. Amy Champ, trust me, like I just had to learn the hard way. It was a lot, but it's like, the more laughter is the biggest medicine, which I've learned in this year too, is like, I'm in a place where, I've been through earthquakes, I've been through losing everyone. There's just been, it's like, what's next? What, it's just, you got to learn to laugh at it. Because, and I know it's hard to, because I've also been on the other side when it's not easy to laugh. But I've just learned to not take it so seriously and get so attached to it. But like I said before, that's just how the suffering gets a hold of us.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Well, thank you, sister, for the chat this evening.
Thank
And
you for having me.
thanks again for the podcast. And I'm happy everybody's getting to hear your story. And I'm getting a lot of inspiration out of learning your story and connecting with you. So
Likewise, it's been an honor.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We'll sign off properly before we get cut off. And check out links in my bio to listen to the podcast, links in Wasfia's bio to get to her website, watch the film, and lots of love out there to everyone. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your weekend. All right, sister.
Much love. Thank you,
Blessings.
everyone.